Hey, Team Healthy, my little screen says you're live, so that must mean we're connected. All right. How are you doing today? Okay, now I know most of you are watching on tape delayed. Uh, tape. The insiders know. I love to just say that because it's not what we are, but that's what we are. I'm an old timer. But I love to watch the live chat while we're doing this real time, and some of you jump on a little early before we get started. And y'all are all over the board today. I mean, there's some psychological kind of stuff that you're talking about, but Henry, you and all these guys talking about these Bubba burgers and all the rest that goes there. My goodness. So go get some lunch, then tune in. You're bringing your hunger with you, and y'all are all over the place today. Actually, I love it when I see that you all are enjoying each other's company, and in other videos you put words of helpfulness toward one another, and that's what we talk about when we talk about Team Healthy. We got a good synergy here. We want to just keep it going. Now, for those of you who are new, what I do is I pick up on questions that come through during the week. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the bottom of in the comment section below the video, and I'll pick questions. Obviously, I can't answer them all because there's so many, but I copy and paste, and I've got them right here on my sheets here, and we're going to go over them. And it allows me to know who you are and what you're dealing with, and we can be more specific. So it's a different way of interacting with each other. Now, today, the theme that I'm going with is I want you to see that when a person goes into the narcissistic pattern with you, there are multiple side effects, if you will, that go along with it. It's not just about them being in control or them being selfish or condescending, etc., which is all part of the narcissistic pattern. But then you'll see that there are just all sorts of predictable other ingredients that just seem to come along with it. That's what we're going to talk about here today, and we're going to start with one. And I love it when you guys just kind of speak in very plain terms with one question here. This first question that we have for today. This individual says, what is the difference between narcissism and just being a rotten person? Okay, just plain and simple. And I think, well, it would be easy to say, well, all narcissists are rotten people, and all rotten people are narcissists. Let's take a look at those two words, narcissism and rot. Why don't we say that narcissism is the pattern of life that a person can be in? Rot is the net result of the pattern of narcissism. Does that make sense? When we talk about rot and something that's rotted, we're talking about decay. And when we talk about decay in the psychological sense, we can say there's a moral decay, an ethical decay, an emotional stability decay. Whatever might have been good on the inside of a person, when I say good, having a good handle on anger, or having a good willingness towards empathy and things like that, has rotted. In other words, it's decayed. It's becoming no more. And then ultimately, if we can stick with that theme of rot, a stench comes up. So when you have the pattern of narcissism, one of the side effects is it's a stinky relationship, if we want to put it that way. Now, I know that many of you have people that are in key positions in your life where it's like, uh, it's pervasive. And just like if you go into a room or a sewer and it's like, oh, it smells so awful in here, you want to get away from it. Well, sometimes that psychological stench can be there. And so your question is, well, what do I do when I notice that I'm with somebody that has a lot of the narcissistic ingredients, and then there's this rot that's there? Well, the last thing you need to do is to think, well, I'm just going to join with them and I'm going to decay as well. Someone needs to be healthy. Someone needs to be whole, and whatever the opposite of rot is, pure. And I want to see if I can aim toward that. So, what's the difference between narcissism and a rotten person? Well, you can see that there's just kind of a one sort of goes with the other. One's the pattern, the other is the result. And you don't want to get caught in their pattern of narcissism in reverse so that you don't rot. You want to maintain your sense of decency and healthiness down the road. That's why we put so much emphasis on that. Now, another one. And I'm going to see if we can test your insight on this one. As I read through this, there's one defense mechanism that is being represented in this question. And if you're in the comments section, jot it down and see. Let's see if any of you get this right. This person says, "How do you respond to a narcissist who complains about other narcissists when they seem to know everything about narcissism and yet they refuse to see it in themselves? I know this person knows that I'm onto them and they're still trying to convince me." So the narcissist looks at other people and say, "That person sure has a lot of narcissistic tendencies." And as you engage, it's like, "You're not buying this, are you?" And yet they still keep trying to convince you, "No, I'm not the one. You are." Okay, what's the defense mechanism? All right, let's see. I'm just looking here. Sharice, I guess that is. You get the gold star for today. Projection. Okay, it's projection. They see in you what they don't want to see within themselves. Also, let's see. We have. All right. I'm trying to find something about neighborhood. Find neighborhood. There you go. Y'all got it. You're on it. Narcissists, rather than saying, I understand that narcissism is a pattern of control and selfishness and condescension and manipulating people and having little empathy. Apparently, they may intellectually, and it makes you wonder how much they really know, but they may intellectually understand that that's the ingredients. They read it in the textbook, so to speak. And then they think, yeah, good thing I don't have that. You do, but I don't. And it's frankly rather astonishing when someone will go around and talk about everybody else's problems. And then when it's time for them to say, well, honesty requires me to say I've got my issues too. Narcissists just will not go into that space, will they? Narcissism is built upon lies. It's built upon dishonesty, starting with being dishonest with oneself. I want you to think about some of the people in your world who have they're constantly criticizing and ridiculing others for their problems, and they come on real strong in a judgmental way. That person is so inappropriate. And yet that individual themselves may be ground zero for a whole lot of relationship garbage. You ever see that happen? And it's like, okay, this is what we mean when we say that they have such a poor sense of self-reflection. They have a very poor sense of insight. That's another of the byproducts of or side effects of narcissism. They're so busy rationalizing and defending oneself that their analytical skills are very self-serving, shall we say. And so, yeah, how do you respond to that narcissist who complains about other narcissists? um, I would, you don't want to say, "Hey, you're the one with the problem," because I mean, if you're that blunt, I mean, you can if you want to, but they'll deny it. And I might say something like, I can tell that when other individuals are very selfish or controlling, that seems to bother you quite a bit. Help me understand why that is. I just talk to them and let them know. I can tell that that's something that disturbs you. Where do you see yourself with respect to those characteristics? And see if they'll have any insight. Now, that assumes that person even would want to engage with you on that level. I hold no illusion that you can say something like that, trying to get them to a place of self-awareness. I have no illusion that the narcissist is going to say, "Well, a light bulb just went off." It probably won't, but I'm one of these that rather than saying, "Here's your problem and this is what it is and here's the label that we stick on it," go into a descriptive way of discussing things with that person and see if that might be a way of opening up some sort of introspection. Keep your expectations low, but just keep in mind, it's part of their projection. It's part of their defense mechanism when they accuse everyone else and they take themselves off the hook. And by the way, as an aside, here we are, Team Healthy. And I'm hoping that each of us can say, well, I'm committed to my own good ingredients. Part of being on Team Healthy can be your ability to say, I too have the capacity for my negatives, my anger, my agitation, my defenses. And rather than taking the side effect that impacts the narcissist and going into projection and denial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be open about it, and I'm going to see it for what it is, and I'm going to do something about it. And that's your way of saying, when my negatives come along, I'm going to grow. And so it's kind of strange. The best way to get beyond your negatives is to admit them first and face up to them and say, yeah, I'm going to start with honesty. And the narcissist says, yeah, you need to be honest. They can't include themselves. Or if they say, I'm being honest about myself, it's like, well, then there's a serious dose of delusion that you've been drinking. Okay, this is another one. Now, obviously, this person has heard me talk about how each one of us needs to claim our sense of freedom from a narcissist. So this person just ask a basic question: how can you be free when you're married to a narcissist? Now, do you catch what that person is saying? The implication is I feel caged in. I feel tied down. I feel like I'm so tethered to that person that I am not free. Well, sure enough, in the external sense, you may have a certain restriction on you. And frankly, don't we all have certain restrictions of some sort? For example, when you have young children, you just don't have the liberty, the freedom to go and do some things that somebody who has no kids at home can do. Or if you are limited in the money that you have, then you don't have the liberty to spend like some other individuals will do. So I get that. There are some physical restraints that we have. But what is freedom? Freedom doesn't mean you can go and do anything you want. Freedom simply means the privilege to choose. And sometimes, even though you're restricted in some of your external options in front of you, you still you still have a measure of freedom. For example, if you have a marital partner who doesn't want to go to certain social functions, and you think, well, I'm just kind of tied down here, and I'd rather be out there doing some social stuff. Or if you have a marital partner who yells a lot, well, I don't feel like I can, discuss things in a very clear and honest way. So there are side effects that the narcissism brings to the equation, but you still have choices, and that's what I mean when I talk about you can still be free. And rather than thinking in all or nothing kinds of terms, that would lead you to think, well, because some of my options are restricted, that means everything is restricted. That's all or nothing thinking. Rather than going into that, it's like, well, yes, some of my options are limited, particularly the physical limitations. And then some of the possibilities of me having a rewarding relationship with that person, that's going to be limited. But I still have freedom in the sense that I can choose who I'm going to be. One of my heroes in the field of psychotherapy is Viktor Frankl, and many of you know he was the neuropsychiatrist who was held prisoner in the Auschwitz in the Nazi takeover of much of Europe, and he wound up surviving 3 years in the concentration camps. And he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. Through it all, you still have to figure out what's the meaning in my life and how do I get through this. And such a powerhouse book. But one of the things that he implies in his writing is you can do whatever you want to the outside of them, because you see, I can't control that. But you can't have what's on the inside of me. That's what we're talking about when we say you're going to hold on to your vestige of freedom. So I know that many of you have very distasteful external circumstances, but then the question is, in what ways might I do a better job of being true to myself and choosing for myself who I'll be? And if the narcissist wants to shut me down, how might I go ahead and proceed, even in small victories, in ways that implies I respect me enough to say I'm going to be free. I'm going to be free to be who I am. So that's a huge one. One of my courses is called Free to Be, and it goes heavily into all that kind of a mindset. Okay. And one more thought. When you feel frustrated because that other person is restricting you, ask yourself, in what direction is my frustration leading me? Okay. I feel frustrated. I don't like that. Okay. What do you like? In the set of circumstances you have, what options do you have? Okay. All right. Now, talking about the side effects of narcissism, this next one picks up on another one. It's procrastination. This person says, why do narcissists procrastinate so much? Now, this is extremely common with the covert narcissist. and especially the vulnerable covert narcissist. The vulnerable narcissist is the one that's just kind of, they walk in the room, they just suck all the energy out. It's kind of like they're morose and down, and nothing's going to work. But even the covert narcissist who doesn't have quite that dimension, they just don't want to reveal themselves quite all the way. So why do narcissists procrastinate so much? Now, let me ask you this. Do you see procrastination as being a form of anger? Now, on the surface, we think stereotypically about anger, and we think of somebody screaming at the top of their lungs and yelling and cursing and slamming doors. And yeah, that's anger, all right. Um, when we talk, and that's openly aggressive anger. But then we have a whole category of anger that's what we call passive aggressive anger. The aggressive person, and keep in mind, procrastination is a form of aggression. The aggressive person wants you to struggle. They want you to feel hurt. They want you to feel awkward and uncomfortable. Now, you can do it in a passive way. It's like, well, if you want me to help you out with a project, sure, I'll be glad to. And then an hour later, I haven't done it yet. Next day, oh, I forgot, or something else came up, or oh, I'm going to get back to it. And what they're wanting is they want you to feel uncomfortable. And sure enough, when it's like, come on, I need your help. It's like, it's working. And so they're aggressing against you with the least amount of open vulnerability. That's passive aggressive. I just did a video on that came out very recently. And so to them, it's like, well, actually, it's my way of digging at you, and it's my way of making you feel miserable in a way that keeps me off the hook. And it's to them, now, I don't know that they're insightful enough to say this, but it's kind of genius. Same thing with laziness, procrastination and laziness. Laziness is their way of looking at you and say, get out of here. You don't mean anything to me. I do what I want to do. But they don't actually say it. They just let their behavior imply it. And then when you say, hey, is there a problem here? Then the passive aggressive person can say, not with me. I don't have a problem. You got a problem? And so it's very manipulative, and it's very exploitive. And you can see that it's a crazy maker. And the more you respond with your crazy making kind of reaction, it's like, work for me. And so when they procrastinate, they're basically saying, I choose not to coordinate with you. You put your consequences out there. For example, if, the simple thing, if somebody's running late, they procrastinate, and you're ready to go, just go. I know it's easier said than done. Or if somebody's not willing to work on a project, it's like, well, I'm going to go ahead and take care of my part, and I'm just not going to include you in other projects with me then. And so that's what we talk about when we talk about your own stipulations and your consequences. It's crazy the way they like to do that, isn't it? Okay, now this next one. Let's see if you can figure out if there's one word that would describe this one. Now, I want those of you who are in the live chat, go ahead and put it in there. This person says, do narcissists say it's okay to do something and then suddenly change their mind and act as if they have no idea why you thought it was okay? If so, what is this called? Okay, I want to see what some of you come up with. And what is it called when they know it hurts you and they make fun of you for believing them? Okay, there you go. All right. The neighborhood person, gaslighting, you got it. It's Aaron, you got it there. Gaslighting. What is gaslighting? Gaslighting, it comes from the old movie years ago, I think in the 1940s, and I've seen it a couple times, where this one guy tried to convince this woman that he was supposedly in love with, but he's actually trying to get her wealth. He wanted to convince her that she was crazy. And he would go upstairs and do stuff. And when he would be upstairs messing around with the jewels and stuff like that, sometimes he would bump with stuff, and the gaslighting, the gas lights in the house would go dim. And so that's how we knew he was upstairs. So that's the gaslighting. That's where that comes from. But she would say, well, I didn't do this. And he would say, well, I think there's something goofy going on with you. You'll notice that in these kind of things, the narcissist will, if there's another, term that we use for the game, it's called bait and switch. For example, let's suppose you're in the car with a narcissist, and that person says, you need to go down this way and turn left and over here. And then you do, and it turns out that it's a wrong turn. And so then the narcissist will come back and say, well, you just can't drive very well, can you? Bait and switch. I'm going to talk to you about, I'm showing cooperation, but then later on, it's like, man, you're just messed up. It's part of their gaslighting. Or let's suppose that they talk with you about how to manage the kids. They talk with you about how to deal with this person at work. And then when you do what they say and it blows up on them, then the comment is, I just wish that you could figure this out. In other words, you're a screw up. Well, I'm the one that told you what to do, and it didn't work, but it's still your fault. Or if you're handling a project at the house, and the narcissist says, "Well, if you do C, D, and E in advance, then I think that'll take care of it." So you do, and it still doesn't take care of it. It's like you just don't know you don't know what you're doing. And so they can give you advice. And then when you go along with their advice and it proves to be ill fated, then they come along and say, well, this proves one thing. This proves that you're a screw up. And it's like, no, I kind of think that it proves that you don't give good advice. Or I think it proves that you're messing with me. And it's like, no, it's you. And when they come back at you with the it's you message long enough, that's the gaslighting, that's the bait and switch. And then ultimately it's like, well, maybe it is me. Every time I'm around this person, something falls apart. And it's like, good, I was hoping you'd arrive at that conclusion. And basically, and this seems so oh playgroundish. The narcissist wants you to take the role of the stupid person in the equation. And so if they can kind of lead you down the path towards stupidity and then pull back and let you go down that path, it's like, I don't know why you went down that path. It's like, well, you're holding my hand the whole way. No, I wasn't. It's you. That's one of their games. Crazy, isn't it? That's one of the side effects, though, when you deal with a narcissist. They're gaslighting. Okay. No, now I put this next one here directly behind this for a reason. Another person, speaking of gaslighting, says, uh, telling someone they're gaslighting you and then telling them to stop. And then this person just has a colon. Good or not good? Okay, so you do figure out, hey, wait a minute, you're gaslighting me and I want you to stop doing it. Is it good to go ahead and openly articulate that? Well, I have a qualified response to that one. There are times when it is good to stand up for yourself and say, something's not right here. I will say, though, that there are certain words in our psychological, pop psychology, if you will, nomenclature that will probably not serve you well. And one of them is the word gaslighting, another is the word narcissist. If you say you're a narcissist, then all that person hears is you called me a nasty name. Or if you say you're gaslighting me, it's like, nah, everybody uses that word. And so what they do is to them it means nothing. When you and I use those terms, it has a meaning to it, has a root system to it, and hopefully you're using it with insight. So instead of using the term, be descriptive in what you're saying. For example, it might be that they have gaslit you. In other words, they're trying to make you say one thing, and then when you do, then they come back and tell you how wrong they are. I might say something like, sometimes when I talk with you, I feel like we're going in circles, and I don't know that I want to participate in that. Or I know that you have intentions that you'd like for me to prioritize. I don't think that it's in my best interest to do that anymore. And so say that. What you're implying is you're gaslighting me, but as soon as you use that word, then they won't even hear the rationale. Now, so say what needs to be said, and then let that explanation stand. Now, there's an incredibly low probability that a strongly narcissistic person will say, "Well, thanks for the enlightenment. I had no idea." Now, they might say it superficially, but they won't change. But if you have a person who's honest and it's like, hey, look, you got me. I didn't even realize that I was doing that. So thank you for pointing that out. And you might be able to adjust and move on. That's probably a fairly healthy person you're dealing with. Narcissists aren't healthy enough to receive your input. But go ahead and describe what caused you to confront, as opposed to using terms that tend to be just dismissed almost immediately. And that's just a good rule of thumb anyway. For example, another thing, if a child comes in and makes an A on a spelling test, rather than saying, hey, way to go, mate, way to make that A. Be descriptive there too. I know you studied a lot and the studying paid off. So I know you're feeling proud of yourself, aren't you? Or if they make an F, it's like, well, that must have been much more difficult than you thought it was going to be. Let's talk about that. How do you suppose that happened? And so you can give descriptive communication, and it's a much fuller way of connecting with people. Okay, now this one, I hope that you pick up on the same halting kind of reaction that I do. This person says, how can you run into one of these people and not end up being like them? So I'm assuming that this is someone who is talking about having an ongoing relationship with someone who's strongly narcissistic. And then here's the part that makes me do this. This person, how do you run into the person and not end up being just like them? And then this person says, you have to defend yourself. In order to defend yourself, you're going to come off just like they do. And you have the same reaction I do. You have to defend yourself. And my response is, do you? You can if you want to, but you don't have to defend yourself. And that's where this person is getting hooked in. Narcissists themselves are highly defensive. And part of the good defense is a healthy or a strong offense. And so many times they'll come at you in an offensive way. Why? Because that way we don't have to talk about me. And so their offense can be part of their defense. And so you're thinking, okay, I see that your offensive and your judgmental attitudes towards me is part of your defensive nature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be defensive in reverse. In other words, I'll let you set my pace. You're defensive, I can be defensive too. And then I can come back and say, well, I think you're doing this and you're doing that, and you have all these problems. How many times when you take that approach, does it work? And can you count one time? I've had literally, I'll have people say, I've said that to my wife, or I've said that to my coworker 200 times. And then my thinking is, well, do you think 201 is going to be the one that makes it work? Why do you have to defend? One of my mantras is why not? Why defend that which needs no defense? So if the narcissist accuses you and says, I just think you're so stupid, you don't know what you're talking about, and you mess this up. Okay, one time I might explain myself and say what I notice my tone of voice, by the way. I might say something like, I know that you and I are on different terms, but let me share with you, here's what my rationale was. Okay, once. There's a high probability that the narcissist is going to come back and explain why that's no good. So at that point, I'm done. Rather than saying, no, let me explain a little bit better, or let me give you extra ammunition or extra explanations. It's not going to work. And so at some point, it's like, well, what I can do is I can give you my truth. And then what you can do is you can decide you're going to step all over it. That's your prerogative. You can do that. But that being the case, I'm not going to get inside your little spin cycle. I don't do that. And so there's where you invoke what I refer to as your calm confidence. Well, I'm comfortable with what I just said, and I don't need to elaborate. And I've heard from multiples of you who have said that it's so liberating. Go back to our word freedom. It's so liberating to think, I don't have to get inside that orbit, and I don't have to play their games. What a relief. And so when it's clear that the narcissist is just trying to bait you or trying to invalidate you, you don't need to defend. What you need to do is trust yourself and keep moving forward in self-trust. A side effect of narcissism is they want to keep you in a down position. It's like, no, that's your side effect. That's not my side effect. I'm not playing along with that. All right. All right, here's another one, and I suspect that multiples of you have dealt with this one. My question is about the aging covert narcissist. My ex is 74 years old, and a professional explained to me that he is a covert narcissist. We finally divorced after 49 years of marriage. He's become paranoid, and his social anxiety has increased. He's blaming all of his symptoms on me for divorcing him. And then the question is, do narcissists decompose as they age? And I'm not going to say 100% because every now and then some of them can soften, not a lot of them, not enough. But as a general rule, yes, narcissists can actually decompose as they age. You see, part of growth implies that you say, looking back upon my life, there are certain patterns that have worked and there are certain patterns that have not worked. And I need to take a look at what that means. And I need to make my adjustments and accentuate the good and minimize the negatives. Well, in order for that to happen, there's a certain humility that the narcissist would need. I need to look at the destruction I've caused, and it may not be self-flattering, but I need to be honest with myself. Oh, there's another word, honest. You need humility, you need honesty, you need to have insight and awareness. And part of the definition of narcissism is the lack of it. I have spoken to multiple people who might say, well, I sat down with dear old dad, or I sat down with this person at work who's, everything has to be their way, and they're up there and they're old and crotchety. And when you talk with them, they're just dismissive. Or they may even say, yeah, okay, I need to quit doing that. And they just keep doing it anyway. It's important for you to realize in a vast majority of the cases, the reason narcissists tend not to change is they are held captive by their own dysfunction. It's like, well, I've always been an angry person, or I've always been a defensive person, or I've always been an accusing or critical person, and I ain't letting go of it now. And so many, and now they won't say that consciously, but that's the net result. And so they're imprisoned by their own dysfunctional characteristics. And to them, to say, well, I need to make an adjustment, I need to change that. There's one thing that hinders that, and that is, but that means that I would be shaming myself, and I can't do that. See, when we talk about narcissism being a shame-based pattern of life, it's their way of saying, well, if I can just stay superior, then I avoid that. If I admit negatives, then that means I'm judging myself and I'm being mean, because you see, that's what that's how they learn to think of that. And I have to accept shame. I wonder if it'd be possible for that person to say, well, I'm going to examine my life, and I'm not going to continue to shame myself, but I'm just going to say, I realize what works and what doesn't work. Objectivity. And I have a certain regret for the things that I've done, but I'm so glad that with time comes perspective, and I'm able to make the necessary adjustments. That's what healthy people do. They can look at themselves and their failures without having to receive shame. But one of the reasons narcissists, in this case, the 74-year-old man, it seems to be getting worse and worse, is like, I don't want to face that, because that means admitting shame as opposed to admitting the need to change, which are two different things. So yes, they tend to decompose when they prove to be unwilling or unable to go into that kind of direction. The narcissism is in full control. All right. Another person. My question is it possible to develop strong narcissistic traits later in life as a result of emotional trauma? A little bit of a different kind of a question. But let's suppose you have somebody that in their teens and their 20s and 30s, they were jovial and friendly and pleasant. And then all the while, they've had key people in their life who've treated them with disdain and with contempt. And as a result, their confidence is whittled down, or they become more angry or argumentative, or they start getting bitter. I remember it was really interesting. I was at a restaurant in Dallas, and this is a few years ago, and I encountered a guy that I knew at college, and I was around 65 at the time. For those of you who don't know, I'm 70 now. And this guy, he was one of the funniest guys you ever met way back when, and I had seen him at alumni events off and on through the years. And when I started talking with him, I mean, that guy was just dripping with bitterness. And it's like, I don't know what happened to him. Of course, I was just meeting him at a restaurant, so I wasn't going to be able to get into the weeds with him on that. But there are times when a person ages, and that pleasant and friendly kind of person can go off to the wayside as negative experiences with disappointing people come along. And yes, it can just eat away at them. That's part of the side effect of the narcissism. It's like, well, why would I want to hold on to that old optimism I had. It doesn't belong to me anymore. Failures do come. People will let you down. Some people will take you out of their life, and these are people that you didn't want that to be the case with. I mean, there are all sorts of painful kind of circumstances, and so the question is, well, when that happens, does the cumulative effect of it all make me a less and less effective individual? And there's a part of me that says, well, go ahead and let yourself have the pain. Go ahead and let yourself have the hurt and the frustrated emotions with the idea that that's not going to be the only thing that defines you. There are times when people get into support groups, and then particularly later in life, and then they realize, other people, they may not have my exact story, but they have stories too. And the older I get, the more I see that many individuals who get in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, very few people can say, well, it all unfolded exactly like I thought. Life is perfect. But many will say, well, I've had this stumble, or I've had this disappointment, or this person that I didn't think was going to do it to me. They betrayed me, or whatever it might be. And so, yes, if you have this idealism that guides you, and then life happens, then you can go deeper and deeper into your bitterness, which opens up the potential for the narcissism to creep in. I wish I could control people better. I just wish I could have manipulated events more powerfully. And you have this sense of negativity and condescension toward other individuals. And so it's a matter of asking, can I learn to guard myself so that when, not notice I didn't say if, but when life difficulties come along, I'm not going to be pulled down to the extent that it completely eliminates my good. There is the possibility of having a cumulative effect, but as you a buddy of mine used to say, you need to keep cleaning the junk out of your trunk. As I pull the junk out of the trunk and keep examining myself and stay fresh with healthy individuals, then that's going to keep that cumulative effect from being too erosive. Okay. Great question, by the way. All right. Now, this person is apparently trying to come to terms with their own parents. The narcissistic parents really have no empathy, or did they just not want kids from the very beginning? Okay, so the implication I'm assuming is, well, I grew up with parents who just didn't empathize, and they just don't seem to care about who I am. They don't make much effort to know me from the inside out. And through the 40 years that I had in my therapy practice, it's like I heard variations of that story many, many times over. So did they just not want kids? And sometimes it might be that someone got pregnant. It's like, well, I'm pregnant. I wish I hadn't. And so sometimes that actually is the case. Sometimes they've had three kids, and when the fourth one comes along and says, I'm done, and I don't want that fourth one. I mean, so that's possible. But then typically, though, when a parent shows a lack of empathy towards the child, it's much more nuanced than that. Their lack of empathy can be an extension of their own pessimism, their own hurt and their own pain, their sense of incompetence on the personal dimension. They might be able to show empathy to some individuals for short periods of times, but long term they don't know how to do it very well. But basically, when you have a parent who goes into parenthood, a lot of them think, "Oh, I can do that." And then they find out it's a whole lot more complex than they thought it was going to be. Then some of their negativity begins to take over. And so you may be thinking, well, is this me? Did I do something to cause this, or is there something on the inside of them? And usually there's their lack of empathy toward you as a parent to the child is part of their emotional fatigue, and is part of their lack of training and competence. In other words, I don't know what to do when certain emotions or certain complex situations come along. They don't handle complexity very well, or it's like I'm just too lazy at this point. I don't feel like it. It's not about you when that happens. But typically, narcissistic parents are very satisfied if you will just turn into a mini me. If it's just like, look, be what I tell you to be, okay? Act like I say you ought to act, and that's the laziness. It's like, well, that means you're not taking the time and the effort to find out what's unique about that particular child that's in front of you. But there are many complex issues that go into the making of their lack of empathy. So if you're struggling with it, just know that mom and dad, or whichever one it is an immature person. And it's so interesting when you find that adult child of the narcissistic parent who figures it out, and then they realize, I have surpassed my own parent in the maturity category. And you like to think that the parent is going to be the wise old sage, but many of them are just old fools. I mean, you hate to put it that way, but nonetheless, make sure that that doesn't happen to you, and understand they've got their own issues in their closet they're not coming to terms with. All right, one more question here. This person, and this is one of these persistent kind of side effects that we have. This person says, 2 or 3 years ago, I put up some boundaries with my narcissistic mother. One of them is, don't yell at me anymore. Well, she did it the other day, and I pointed it out, and she said, I can raise my voice if I want to, which is actually a true statement. She can. And then this person writing the question says, yeah, but I'm not going to listen to it. Okay, that's true too. She's 78 years old, and I don't think it's right to go no contact. So I need to be able to deal with her. I can't even stand to hug her. What should I do? She once said it's normal for families to yell at each other. And I said, no, it's not. And she said, you haven't been around enough families to know. In other words, you're just stupid. All right, so you've got this situation, 78-year-old parent, and I'm going to assume you're somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 years old now. You're a middle-aged person, and it's like, I know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and that's not appropriate. I've been putting up with that crap all my life, and I don't want to have to keep doing it all until the day she dies. And it's like, what do I do? I don't feel like it's right, and good for you that you have a sense of moral responsibility to say, I want to take care of people. But let's keep in mind, you don't need to do so at the cost of your own emotional well-being or mental health. Keep in mind, we don't have to be all white and all black. There are times when you'll say, well, okay, mom lives nearby. She yells a lot. She's very unpleasant. And it might be that what you'll do is when you check on her, you'll, instead of staying 2 hours, you might stay 20 minutes. Or instead of going 3 times a week, you might go every 10 days, enough to kind of keep things going. And then if the mom says, why aren't you coming around as much? You leave a lot quicker. The answer is, yes, I know. And it goes back to my comment that I made. You yell a lot. And so as long as that's going to continue, then I'll take care of myself. I want to check on you. But as I've said, I don't want to be yelled at. And you say, well, yelling's okay for you. If that's your norm, fine. But that's not my norm. And be honest. And so maintain your contact. And the more steady you are, and if you're over there trying to help out with mom and she goes into the griping session, it's okay to say, I think it's time for me to wrap up for today. And as opposed to, mom, there you go again. No, let your consequences do it. And there are times when it's just like, I'm not going to go along with it. And frankly, it's kind of the same way that you do with a 7-year-old child. If you want to argue when we go into the store, then we just won't go into the store. Or if you want to throw a fit when you have your friends over, then we'll just not have friends over. Consequences. And so in this case, the consequence is your presence. And so you don't have to do all or nothing, but modulate and let that. And if she says, well, I don't like that one bit, it's like, yes, I'm aware of that. Yeah, I know you don't like it, just as I don't like being yelled at. So until that's remedied, then I'm going to continue doing what I am and just be straight up with it. That's what I like anyway. Okay, so you can see by our questions here, and we have so many more that we can get to, and that's why we're going to do it again next week. You can see that there are so many elements that go along with the narcissistic pattern that you're having to come to terms with, and the possibilities are endless. And so the key for you is it's like, I'm on team healthy, and I'm going to remind myself that I do not have to join that person at their place of unhealthiness. And in doing so, I'm hoping you can decide, well, this is your freedom. I'm free to choose who I'm going to be. And even if I have certain physical limitations as to what I can do, still, you can't have control of my psychological well-being. That belongs to me. So thanks for your questions here today. I hope that you have a good rest of the week. Keep sending those questions in. I love it when I get them, and it just kind of tells me know where you are in your place in the world. Thanks for letting me be on your journey, and I will see you same time, same station next week. Bye, Team Healthy. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your encouragement towards me and toward one another.